Hello everyone, Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back to Real Talk with Ehaan, the place where we talk about real life, real struggles, and real truths. Today's episode is something almost every young person can relate to, something that quietly affects our decisions, our focus, and sometimes even our future. Love versus career. Why do people fail, even when they have potential? Why do relationships break, even when the feelings are real? And why do we feel stuck, even when we truly want to grow? These are not just questions. These are realities that many people are living through right now. Do you follow your heart, or do you focus on building your future? Can you actually manage both, or is that just something we tell ourselves? Most people believe they have to choose one, but today we're going to challenge that belief. We're not just going to talk about love or career. We're going to talk about responsibility, mindset, and control. Joining me today is Ayaan, someone who believes in self-discipline, ownership, and building a strong mindset. He's not the kind of person who blames situations or people. He believes that no matter what happens in life, you are responsible for how you respond. His perspective is direct, honest, and sometimes uncomfortable. But that's exactly what makes it real. Ayaan, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Ehaan. I'm really glad to be here. And honestly, this topic is something a lot of people feel confused about, but very few actually try to understand deeply. So today, let's not just talk. Let's break it down in a real and honest way.
Why do people feel like love and career can't go together?
Because most people don't have clarity in their priorities. They treat both love and career as full-time demands, so naturally they feel overwhelmed. Instead of organizing their life, they assume one has to be sacrificed for the other.
So, are you saying the problem is not love or career, but the way people handle them?
Exactly. When you lack structure and self-control, even simple things feel complicated. Love and career can coexist, but only when you know how to manage your time, energy, and emotions properly.
Why do people fail, even when they clearly have potential?
Because potential is just a starting point, not a guarantee. People rely too much on what they can do instead of focusing on what they actually do daily. Without discipline, potential slowly fades away.
So, what separates successful people from those who fail?
Consistency. Successful people show up even when they don't feel like it. Others wait for the right mood, and that's where they fall behind.
Why do so many relationships break despite strong feelings?
Because feelings alone are not enough. Relationships need understanding, patience, and emotional stability. Most people enter relationships with expectations, but without the maturity to handle them.
So, is love becoming weaker, or are people becoming less patient?
People are becoming less patient. Everyone wants instant happiness, but real relationships require effort and time, something most people aren't willing to give.
Why do people feel stuck in life, even when they want to grow?
Because they get trapped in overthinking. They keep planning, worrying, and doubting themselves instead of taking action. This creates a cycle where nothing actually changes.
So, how can someone break that cycle?
By starting small but staying consistent, action creates clarity. The more you act, the less confused you feel.
Do relationships really distract people from their goals?
They can, but only if a person loses control. A healthy relationship supports your growth, not destroys it. The real problem is when people forget their priorities.
What does a healthy balance actually look like?
It means giving time to your relationship without sacrificing your goals. It's about discipline, not choosing one over the other.
Why do people blame their partner or situation when they fail?
Because blaming others feels easier than accepting responsibility. It protects their ego and helps them avoid facing their own mistakes.
But what if someone genuinely had a distracting partner?
Even then, you're responsible for your decisions. You choose how much time you give, how you react, and what you prioritize.
What's the biggest mistake people make when they fall in love?
They lose their identity. They start revolving their entire life around one person and forget their own goals and purpose.
Why do people fall into that trap so easily?
Because they confuse love with attachment. They think giving everything proves love. But in reality, it often creates imbalance.
Can someone truly balance love and career at the same time?
Yes, but it requires emotional maturity. You need to understand when to focus, when to step back, and how to manage both without letting either suffer.
So, what's the key skill here?
Self-discipline. Without it, balance is impossible.
How does social media affect people's thinking about love and success?
It creates unrealistic standards. People compare their real lives with curated highlights, which leads to dissatisfaction and pressure.
And how does that impact decisions?
People start chasing validation instead of building real value. That leads to poor choices in both relationships and career.
Why do people often choose love over career?
Because emotions feel immediate and powerful, while career requires patience. People naturally move toward what feels good in the moment.
So, how can someone avoid making emotional decisions?
By thinking long term. If you pause and ask, will this matter in 5 years? Your decisions automatically become smarter.
Why do people often ignore their long-term goals so easily?
Because long-term goals don't give instant results. People get attracted to comfort and quick happiness, so they delay the work that actually matters.
So, comfort is the real enemy?
Yes, comfort feels safe, but it slowly destroys ambition. Growth always requires discomfort.
Why do people become emotionally dependent in relationships?
Because they haven't built emotional strength within themselves. They start relying on one person for happiness, which creates dependency.
And what's the danger of that?
You lose control over your own emotions. Your mood, focus, and decisions start depending on someone else.
Why do people delay important work, even when they know it's important?
That's procrastination. People avoid effort because it feels uncomfortable, even if they know it's necessary.
So how can someone break that habit?
By starting small. Don't wait for motivation. Just begin. Action reduces resistance.
Why do people repeat the same mistakes again and again?
Because they don't reflect. They go through situations but never actually learn from them.
So what's the solution?
Self-awareness. If you don't analyze your actions, you'll keep repeating them.
What are the biggest distractions today?
Social media, unnecessary conversations, and uncontrolled emotions. These things slowly take away your focus.
How can someone protect their focus?
By controlling their environment. Limit distractions and create space for productive work.
Why do people give up so quickly?
Because they expect fast results. When they don't see progress immediately, they lose hope.
So what mindset should they have instead?
A long-term mindset. Real success takes time, and patience is part of the process.
Why do people feel insecure in relationships?
Because they compare themselves with others and doubt their own worth.
How can someone overcome that insecurity?
By building self-confidence through personal growth, not by seeking validation.
Why do people overthink simple situations?
Because of fear. Fear of making mistakes or being judged. So they keep thinking instead of deciding.
And what's the best way to deal with overthinking?
Take action. Even a small decision is better than endless thinking.
Why do people struggle with consistency?
Because they depend on their mood. When they don't feel like working, they stop.
So how do you stay consistent?
By following a routine, not emotions. Discipline creates consistency.
Why do people avoid responsibility in life?
Because responsibility brings pressure, and people try to escape pressure instead of growing through it.
So what happens when someone starts taking responsibility?
They become stronger. Responsibility doesn't break you, it builds you.
Why do people lose focus after starting something strong?
Because they start with excitement, but don't build a system. When excitement fades, they have nothing to hold them.
So what keeps someone going after motivation is gone?
Habits. Systems are stronger than motivation
Why do people struggle to say no in relationships?
because they fear losing the other person. So they sacrifice their own priorities to keep someone happy.
And what does that lead to?
Imbalance. And eventually, frustration.
Why do people feel mentally exhausted so often?
Because their mind is always overloaded. Too much thinking, too many distractions, no clarity.
How can someone reduce that mental load?
Simplify life. Focus on fewer things, but do them properly.
Why do people lose themselves in relationships?
Because they make the relationship their entire identity.
So what should they do instead?
Keep their individuality. A relationship should be part of your life, not your whole life.
Why do people fail to manage time properly?
Because they don't respect time. They spend it casually and regret it later.
How do you build respect for time?
By planning your day and sticking to it.
Why do people avoid difficult decisions?
Because difficult decisions come with discomfort and risk.
But avoiding them makes things worse, right?
Always. Delayed decisions create bigger problems.
Why do people depend on others for motivation?
Because they haven't built inner drive. They look for external push instead of internal discipline.
How do you build that inner drive?
By taking responsibility for your life and your outcomes.
Why do people feel confused about their priorities?
Because they never sit and think clearly about what truly matters.
So what's the solution?
Clarity comes from reflection. You need time alone to understand yourself.
Why do people chase validation?
Because they don't feel enough internally, so they look for approval outside.
And what's the long-term impact of that?
You lose your real identity trying to please others.
Why do people lose motivation over time?
Because they rely on feelings instead of building consistency.
So what replaces motivation?
Discipline and routine.
Why do people get distracted easily nowadays?
Because everything around them is designed to grab attention.
So how can someone stay focused?
By being intentional about what they consume and where they spend time.
Why do people struggle with emotional control?
Because they react instantly instead of thinking before acting.
How do you build emotional control?
Pause before reacting. That one moment changes everything.
Why do people regret their past decisions?
Because they made decisions based on emotions, not logic.
So how can someone avoid regret?
Think long-term before making decisions.
Why do people stay in unhealthy relationships?
Because they fear loneliness more than toxicity.
Is loneliness really that bad?
No. Sometimes loneliness is better than losing yourself.
Why do people lack self-confidence?
Because they don't trust their own abilities.
How do you build that trust?
By taking action and proving to yourself that you can improve.
Why do people avoid self-reflection?
Because it forces them to face uncomfortable truths.
But that's necessary, right?
Yes. Growth begins where comfort ends.
Why do people feel lost in life?
Because they don't have direction.
How do you find direction?
By trying different things and learning from experience.
Why do people quit when things get hard?
Because they are not mentally prepared for struggle.
So how do you build that mental strength?
By facing challenges instead of avoiding them.
Why do people compare their life with others?
Because they don't appreciate their own journey.
How do you stop comparing?
Focus on your progress, not someone else's success.
Why do people fail in both love and career?
Because they lack balance and self-management.
So what's the root problem?
They don't take control of their own life.
Why do people feel like they're working hard but still not moving forward in life?
Because effort without direction often turns into frustration. A lot of people are busy, but not productive. They're putting in hours, but those hours aren't aligned with a clear goal.
So instead of progress, they experience repetition. Real growth only happens when effort is intentional, focused, and measured.
So, how can someone make sure their effort actually leads to progress?
By setting clear goals and regularly reviewing their actions. If what you're doing today doesn't connect to where you want to be tomorrow, then it's just motion, not progress.
Why do people struggle to let go of toxic situations, even when they know it's hurting them?
Because emotional attachment is stronger than logical understanding. Even when someone knows something is toxic, they hold on to memories, hope, or fear of starting over. Letting go feels like losing something, even if that thing is painful.
So, what helps someone finally let go?
Clarity and self-respect. When you value your peace more than your attachment, letting go becomes a decision, not a struggle.
Why do people keep repeating the same mistakes in relationships?
Because they don't pause to reflect on what went wrong. Instead of learning, they move on quickly and carry the same patterns into the next relationship. Without awareness, behavior doesn't change.
So, what breaks that cycle?
Self-awareness. When you understand your patterns, your triggers, your habits, you start making different choices.
Why do people feel stuck, even when they want to grow?
Because wanting growth and doing the work required for growth are two different things. Growth requires discomfort, discipline, and consistency. And most people stop when it gets hard.
So, how do you move from intention to action?
By starting small and staying consistent. You don't need motivation every day. You need commitment.
Why do people lose confidence after facing failure?
Because they start associating failure with their identity instead of seeing it as an event. They think I failed means I am a failure, and that destroys confidence.
How can someone rebuild confidence after failure?
By reframing failure as feedback. Learn from it, adjust your approach, and try again. Confidence grows from action, not perfection.
Why do people struggle to maintain discipline in the long term?
Because they rely on motivation to stay consistent. Motivation is temporary, but discipline is built through routine and structure. Without a system, people fall back into old habits.
So, what's the key to long-term discipline?
Consistency over intensity. It's better to do small actions daily than big actions occasionally.
Why do people fear being alone?
Because being alone forces them to face their own thoughts. Many people use relationships or distractions to avoid dealing with themselves.
So, is being alone actually important?
Yes, solitude helps you understand yourself. Without it, you depend on others to define your identity.
Why do people struggle with self-worth?
Because they base their value on external factors, like validation, success, or relationships. When those things fluctuate, their self-worth also drops.
So, how do you build stable self-worth?
By building it internally, through your actions, your values, and how you treat yourself.
Why do people feel like they're running out of time in life?
Because they compare their timeline with others. Social pressure creates this illusion that you're behind, even when you're on your own path.
So how do you deal with that pressure?
By understanding that life is not a race. Everyone has a different journey, and comparing timelines only creates unnecessary stress.
Why do people feel empty even after achieving success?
Because success without purpose feels hollow. Many people chase goals that society defines. Money, status, recognition. But those things don't always fulfill them internally. When you achieve something that doesn't align with your true values, it creates a strange kind of emptiness. You get what you wanted, but still feel like something is missing.
So how does someone avoid that emptiness?
By defining success on their own terms. When your goals are connected to your values and purpose, success feels meaningful, not empty.
Why do people ignore their mental health until it becomes serious?
Because they underestimate its importance. People focus more on external problems, work, money, relationships, but ignore what's happening internally. And the problem is, mental health issues don't show immediate damage, so people keep delaying it until it starts affecting everything. So what should people do differently? Treat mental health like a priority, not an afterthought. Regular self-checks, rest, and emotional awareness can prevent bigger problems later.
Why do people feel disconnected from themselves?
Because they spend more time reacting to the world than understanding themselves. Constant distractions, social media, noise, pressure, pull them away from their inner voice. Over time, they stop knowing what they actually want.
So how can someone reconnect with themselves?
By creating space for silence, reflection, journaling, or even just sitting alone without distractions helps you hear your own thoughts again.
Why do people overthink simple situations?
Because they try to control outcomes that are uncertain. Overthinking is often fear in disguise. Fear of making the wrong decision, fear of judgment, fear of failure.
How do you stop overthinking?
By accepting uncertainty. Not everything can be controlled. Sometimes action is better than endless thinking.
How do people struggle to trust others?
Because of past experiences. When trust is broken once, it creates a protective barrier. People start assuming that history will repeat itself.
So, how do you rebuild trust?
Slowly and consciously. Trust is not blind. It's built step by step with consistency and boundaries.
Why do people avoid change even when they know it's necessary?
Because change brings uncertainty, and uncertainty feels uncomfortable. Even a bad situation can feel safer than the unknown.
So, how do you embrace change?
By shifting your mindset. Seeing change as an opportunity instead of a threat. Growth always comes with uncertainty.
Why do people feel like they're not good enough?
Because they constantly compare themselves to unrealistic standards. Social media, society, and expectations create an illusion of perfection that no one can actually meet.
So, how do you overcome that feeling?
By focusing on your own progress. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to improve.
Why do people fail to maintain balance in life?
Because they prioritize one area too much and ignore others. For example, focusing only on career while neglecting health or relationships creates imbalance.
So, what creates real balance?
Awareness and adjustment. You have to regularly check where your energy is going and make corrections.
Why do people feel lost even when they're doing everything right?
Because right is often defined by others. You can follow all the rules and still feel lost if the path isn't truly yours.
So, how do you find your own path?
By questioning what you're doing and why. When your actions align with your inner beliefs, clarity follows.
If you had to summarize everything we discussed today, why do people fail, relationships break, and people feel stuck, what would you say?
At the core, it all comes down to lack of self-awareness and responsibility. People don't fully understand themselves, and they avoid taking control of their choices. Whether it's failure, broken relationships, or feeling stuck, the root is often the same. When you become aware of your patterns and take responsibility for your life, everything starts to change.
So the solution is within us?
Always. External factors matter, but real change starts from within.
Ayaan, honestly, this conversation was powerful. You didn't just answer questions, you gave clarity to things people struggle to even express. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. These are conversations we all need, but rarely have.
If you take one thing away from this episode, let it be this. Your life doesn't change by chance. It changes by awareness and action. We talked about failure, relationships, growth, and feeling stuck. But the truth is, all of it connects back to how well you understand yourself. To everyone listening, take a moment, pause and reflect on your own life. Where are you stuck? What are you avoiding? And what truth do you already know but haven't acted on? Because sometimes the answers are already within you. You just need the courage to face them. This is Ehaan, and you've been listening to Real Talk with Ehaan. Until next time, stay strong, stay focused. Allah Hafiz.